Starvation is not a quiet process. It is the biological dismantling of the self. Long before the heart stops, the body begins to consume its own muscle tissue to keep the brain operational. You might believe you are prepared because your basement is stacked floor to ceiling with supermarket canned goods. You look at those expiration dates stamped in black ink and you feel safe. You are looking at a lie. The modern food industry has sold you the illusion of permanence in a tin vessel that is destined to fail. When the grid goes down and the supply chains shatter, that stockpile of peaches, beans, and soup is not a survival strategy. It is a ticking biological time bomb waiting to breach its containment. Moisture is the enemy, and you have stockpiled gallons of it. Before we dissect the chemistry of true survival, leave a mark of your presence in the digital void. Strike the like button to confirm you are still standing among the prepared, and subscribe if you have the will to learn the forgotten technologies of the old world. The fundamental flaw in your preparation is a misunderstanding of thermodynamics and bacterial growth. The commercial canning process relies on heat and pressure to sterilize food inside a sealed environment, creating a vacuum that prevents aerobic bacteria from growing. However, the container itself is the weak link. Modern cans are not the heavy-gauge steel of the early 20th century. The manufacturers use thin aluminum or steel alloys, lined with microscopic layers of plastic epoxies to prevent the metal from reacting with the food. Time is a solvent. Over 3 to 5 years, acidic foods like tomatoes or fruits will eat through that liner. The microscopic breach allows the metal to corrode from the inside out. Once the integrity of the seal is compromised, you are no longer storing food. You are cultivating Clostridium botulinum. This neurotoxin is odorless, tasteless, and lethal in microscopic doses. You will open your survival ration, you will eat, and your respiratory system will paralyze within hours. Even if the seal holds, the nutritional value creates a deficit. Most canned goods are mostly water. You are carrying heavy, dense weight for a fraction of the caloric return. In a survival scenario, calories are a unit of energy required to keep the human machine running under stress. A can of green beans offers less than 70 calories. You would need to consume dozens of cans a day just to maintain body temperature in a freezing environment. You cannot carry enough metal to save yourself. To survive the collapse, you must abandon the aisle of the supermarket and look back to the era before refrigeration, before preservatives, and before the industrial dependency that has made society soft. You must look to the Great Plains of North America and the indigenous tribes who mastered the art of portable energy. The solution is not found in a factory. It is found in the biochemistry of the American bison. The Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Métis people did not starve during the brutal winters of the 18th century because they possessed a technology that defies the laws of modern food spoilage. This technology is pemmican. Do not confuse this with the sugary processed beef jerky you find at a gas station. Jerky is a snack. Pemmican is a fuel brick. It is a super concentrated mixture of lean, dehydrated protein and rendered fat, processed in a specific ratio that eliminates moisture entirely. When prepared correctly, pemmican creates a hydrophobic environment where bacteria simply cannot survive. There is no water for the microbes to drink. There is no oxygen for the fats to oxidize if sealed properly. Pemmican does not expire in 3 years. Tales from the fur trade era record caches of pemmican being discovered after 50 years of exposure to the elements, and the food was still perfectly edible. This is the ultimate survival food because it addresses the 2 critical failures of canned goods: weight and longevity. A single pound of pemmican contains roughly 3,500 calories. To get that same energy from canned beans, you would need to carry nearly 30 pounds of weight. In a bug-out scenario, efficiency is not a luxury. It is the difference between movement and death. If you have 10 pounds of pemmican in your rucksack, you are carrying 35,000 calories. That is enough fuel to keep a grown man marching through snow and rough terrain for 2 weeks without stopping to hunt or scavenge. It requires no cooking. It requires no water to prepare. It creates no smoke to give away your position. You can eat it raw while walking. It is the perfect tactical ration. But the modern palate is weak, and the modern mind is lazy. The industry wants you to buy their MREs and their freeze-dried pouches. because those products keep you dependent on their supply chain. Pemmican is dangerous to the economy because it liberates you. You can make it in your kitchen right now, and once you seal it, you never have to spend another dollar on it for the rest of your life. To create this resource, you must understand the science of rendering. You cannot simply melt fat, you must refine it. The goal is to separate the pure lipid structure from the water and impurities found in raw suet. This process requires patience and precision. If you leave water in the fat, the pemmican will go rancid. If you burn the fat, the taste will be acrid and the nutrients degraded. The choice of fat is not arbitrary. The internal hard fats found around the kidneys and loins of ruminant animals, known as suet, contains high levels of stearic acid. This saturated fat is solid at room temperature and has a high melting point. Unlike the soft fat found on a pork chop or the marbling in a steak, rendered suet becomes a hard, wax-like sealant that encases the protein fibers. This is the preservative. There are no chemicals involved. It is a physical barrier constructed at the molecular level. When you mix this rendered tallow with meat that has been dried to the point of being brittle, you are creating a composite material that is impervious to the decay that plagues every other organic substance on Earth. To manufacture this caloric weapon, you must respect the chemistry of the ingredients. The process begins with the protein. You cannot use just any cut of meat. The modern butcher shop is designed to sell you water weights and intramuscular fat, which is desirable for a steak, but catastrophic for preservation. You need the leanest red meat available. Round roast or silver side is ideal because it lacks the connective tissue and gristle that will rot within the mixture. You must become a surgeon with your knife. Every scrap of visible fat on the meat itself must be excised. If you leave fat on the muscle tissue before drying, it will not dehydrate completely. It will retain moisture, it will harbor bacteria, and it will destroy your supply from the inside. Ruthlessness in preparation is the only path to safety. Once the meat is trimmed, the moisture must be purged. You are not cooking the meat, you are desiccating it. In the wild, the Plains Indians use the sun and wind, hanging thin strips of buffalo meat on racks for days. You likely do not have that luxury, or the climate. You will use an oven set to the lowest possible temperature, or a dehydrator. The goal is to keep the temperature below 150 degrees Fahrenheit. If the heat is too high, the outside of the meat will cook and form a hard shell, trapping moisture deep inside the fibers. This phenomenon, known as case hardening, is a death sentence for long-term storage. You must be patient. The meat strips must remain in the dry heat until they snap like glass when you bend them. If the meat bends, if it is chewy, or if it has any elasticity, it is still holding water. Water is the enemy of longevity. While the protein is being reduced to its elemental form, you must process the fuel. You must source beef suet. This is the hard, crumbly fat found around the kidneys of the cow. Do not use lard, which is pig fat, and do not use butter. These fats have different lipid profiles and lower melting points that will cause the pemmican to weep oil and go rancid at room temperature. The suet must be rendered to remove impurities. You chop the fat into small cubes and heat it slowly in a pot. As the temperature rises, the liquid tallow will separate from the connective tissue and membranes. This is a purification ritual. You will see steam rising from the pot. That is the water boiling out of the fat. You must continue the process until the steam stops entirely and the bits of tissue, known as cracklings, turn golden brown and float to the surface. Silence is your indicator. When the pot stops hissing, the water is gone. Now you face the synthesis. The dried meat cannot be left in strips. It must be pulverized into a fine powder. The indigenous tribes used stones to pound the meat into a fibrous dust. You can use a food processor or a heavy mortar and pestle. The result should look like fluffy, fibrous cotton. This increases the surface area of the protein, allowing the fat to coat every single molecule. The ratio is non-negotiable. You will mix the meat powder and the liquid tallow in a 1-to-1 ratio by weight. Not by volume, but by weight. This balance ensures that every particle of meat is completely saturated and encapsulated by the fat. Pour the hot, liquid tallow over the meat powder. Mix it thoroughly until the substance resembles wet sand. This is the moment of creation. While the mixture is still warm, press it into a mold or a pan. You must apply significant pressure. The objective is to drive out any remaining air pockets. Oxygen allows for oxidation, which leads to spoilage. By compressing the mixture, you create a dense, solid brick that is hostile to all forms of aerobic life. You are building a fortress of calories. Once it cools, the tallow hardens, sealing the meat in a suspended state of animation. The result is not a culinary delight designed to please the tongue. It is a dense, waxy block that tastes of unseasoned beef and fat. It is heavy in the hand and leaves a coating of grease on the skin. But this unappealing brick is a miracle of energy density. A single 2-inch square provides enough fuel to heat the body for hours. Unlike carbohydrates, which cause a spike in blood sugar followed by a crash, the fats in pemmican provide a slow, steady burn. This is ketosis fuel. In a survival situation, your body will revert to its primal metabolic state. It will burn fat for energy, and pemmican provides that fuel in its most efficient form. Store your pemmican in a cool, dark place. Wrap it in wax paper or foil. Do not put it in plastic bags unless you have vacuum sealed them, as standard plastic can trap moisture or leach chemicals. If prepared correctly, you can place this block on a shelf and ignore it for decades. When the grocery stores are looted and the neighbors are fighting over the last can of dog food, you will have a source of energy that is as stable as a stone. You can eat it raw. You can boil it with foraged greens to make a stew. You can fry it. It is the universal fuel. However, possessing the ration is only half the equation. You must understand the biological cost of consuming it. If your body is accustomed to the processed sugars and high carbohydrate diet of the modern world, switching abruptly to a high-fat diet like pemmican can cause severe digestive distress. The gallbladder must work overtime to produce bile to break down the lipids. You cannot wait until the apocalypse to test your stomach. You must adapt your biology now. Your body is a chemical processing plant with strict operational limits. If you attempt to survive solely on the lean, dried meat you have prepared, without the addition of the rendered fat, you will die. This is not a theory. It is a biological certainty known as rabbit starvation or protein poisoning. You might believe that stockpiling piles of beef jerky will save you, but the human liver has a ceiling on how much nitrogen it can process. When you consume lean protein, the body breaks it down into amino acids, producing ammonia as a byproduct. The liver must convert this toxic ammonia into urea to be excreted by the kidneys. There is a hard limit. Your liver can only handle enough protein to supply roughly 35% of your daily caloric needs. If you exceed this threshold without sufficient fat or carbohydrates to buffer the reaction, ammonia builds up in the bloodstream. The symptoms of this failure are gruesome. You will eat until your stomach is distended, yet you will feel an insatiable, maddening hunger. You will experience diarrhea, headache, and fatigue as your internal organs begin to shut down under the toxic load. Historical records from the Hudson's Bay Company describe trappers who were surrounded by lean game like rabbits, but wasted away to skeletons while gorging themselves on meat. Fat is not the enemy. Fat is the only thing standing between you and metabolic collapse. The modern fitness industry has brainwashed the population into fearing saturated fats, creating a generation of people who are physically unadapted for survival. In a caloric deficit, cholesterol and saturated fat are essential for hormone production and cellular repair. Pemmican is designed to bypass the protein toxicity trap by locking the ratio at 50% fat and 50% protein. This balance ensures that the protein is used for tissue repair, while the fat provides the furnace heat for the body. Furthermore, the inclusion of specific additives can elevate this ration from a mere fuel source to a complete nutritional shield. While the basic mixture of meat and fat will keep you alive, the lack of vitamin C presents a secondary threat: scurvy. The indigenous tribes understood this deficiency long before the British Navy began issuing limes. They often incorporated dried berries into the pemmican mixture. The Saskatoon berry or the chokecherry is not a garnish. These acidic fruits contain citric acid and essential vitamins that stabilize the fat and prevent oxidation while providing the micronutrients required to maintain gum and skin integrity. The acid in the berries lowers the pH of the mixture, creating a secondary barrier against bacterial growth. If you cannot find these specific berries, dried cranberries or blueberries are a functional substitute, but they must be dehydrated until they are as brittle as the meat. Any residual moisture in the fruit will rot the entire brick. Now, consider the tactical advantage of volume. A A standard survivalist pantry is a logistical nightmare. It requires shelves, rotation schedules, and climate control. It anchors you to a single location. If a mob breaches your perimeter or a fire threatens your home, you cannot put 500 cans of soup in a backpack. You will be forced to leave your investment behind. Pemmican eliminates this vulnerability. A 5-gallon bucket filled with vacuum-sealed pemmican bricks contains enough calories to feed a single individual for half a year. You can bury it, you can hide it in the walls. You can sink it in a waterproof container at the bottom of a lake. It is the ultimate cash resource because it is dense, durable, and unappealing to the uneducated eye. A looter looking for food will ignore a greasy, wax paper-wrapped brick that looks like industrial refuse, unaware that he is bypassing the most valuable item in the wreckage. However, there is a psychological toll that physics cannot quantify. Eating pemmican is a test of will. The texture is waxy and granular. It coats the roof of the mouth with a film of tallow that requires hot liquid to rinse away. There is no crunch, no variety, and no comfort. After 3 days of consuming nothing but this paste, the human mind begins to rebel. The appetite suppresses. Food fatigue sets in. You will find yourself staring at the ration with disgust, preferring hunger to another bite of the bland, greasy block. This is the final trap. You must treat eating as a mechanical act, not a source of pleasure. You are refueling a machine. The moment you seek comfort in your food is the moment you weaken your resolve. You must condition your mind to divorce taste from nutrition. The preparation of this resource also serves as a filter for your own household. It is a labor-intensive, smelly, and messy process. Rendering fat fills the house with the heavy odor of beef. Pulverizing meat takes hours of physical effort. Most people will read this and do nothing. The lazy will click away and buy another bag of rice, convincing themselves that they have done enough. But rice requires water to cook. Rice requires fuel to boil that water. Rice provides empty carbohydrates that burn off in an hour. The man with the pemmican needs no fire, no water, and no pot. He can eat while on the move, maintaining a low profile while the rest of the world lights fires that reveal their positions to every predator in the valley. The greatest lie you have told yourself is that you will return to nature. You imagine a romanticized future where you stalk deer through a silent forest, providing for your family with a rifle and steady aim. This is a fantasy born of movies and ignorance. The reality of collapse is not abundance, it is extinction. When the supply trucks stop moving, 10 million other people in your region will have the exact same idea. They will flood the woodlands. Within 3 weeks, the deer population will be decimated. The squirrels, the rabbits, and even the birds will vanish into stew pots. You will be walking through a dead ecosystem, rifle in hand, burning calories you cannot replace. This is the law of diminishing returns applied to biology. In thermodynamics and ecology, there is a concept known as EROI, or energy return on investment. It is the ratio of energy delivered by a process to the energy used to obtain it. A wolf does not chase a deer if the chase costs more calories than the meal provides. If it does, the wolf dies. You are the wolf, but you have forgotten how to do the math. Trudging through snow-covered terrain and freezing temperatures burns upwards of 500 calories an hour. If you hunt for 6 hours and come back empty-handed, you have created a 3,000 calorie deficit. You are 3,000 calories closer to death than when you woke up. Without a high-density fuel source to bridge the gap between successful hunts, the act of hunting itself becomes a suicide mission. Pemmican is the cheat code for this equation. It is stored labor. It is energy captured during times of plenty and frozen in time, allowing you to survive the inevitable periods of caloric bankruptcy. Furthermore, you must consider the economics of the new world. When the fiat currency collapses and the dollar becomes nothing more than colored paper, the only value left is utility. Gold and silver are heavy, they make noise, and you cannot eat them. In a starvation economy, a brick of pemmican is worth more than a stack of Krugerrands. Food is the ultimate leverage. If you have a surplus of shelf-stable, high-fat protein, you control the local market. You can trade a single pound of pemmican for antibiotics, for ammunition, or for labor. It becomes a unit of currency that never inflates and never loses value. But unlike gold, which must be guarded, Pemmican can be consumed to destroy the evidence of your wealth. It is the perfect stealth asset. However, the industry has actively suppressed this knowledge for a century. Observe the layout of a grocery store. The center aisles are filled with processed grains, sugars, and seed oils, packaged in colorful boxes. These foods are designed to expire. They are designed to be consumed rapidly, triggering an insulin spike that leads to hunger, which leads to another purchase. This is the business model of planned obsolescence applied to human digestion. If they sold you a product that lasted 50 years and satiated your hunger for 12 hours, their stock prices would crash. The food industry relies on your constant, desperate need to feed. By making pemmican, you are opting out of the consumer cycle. You are reclaiming the means of production for your own biological existence. This rebellion requires a shift in your perception of food safety. We have been conditioned to believe that sterilization is safety. We scrub, we bleach, and we refrigerate. But nature does not sterilize. It balances. The fat in pemmican encapsulates the meat, creating an anaerobic environment. It is the same principle that preserves an insect in amber for millions of years. You are creating a fossil of nutrition. But this requires trust in the old ways, a trust that has been eroded by decades of FDA regulations and expiry dates. You must trust that the salt, the dryness, and the fat are sufficient. If you hesitate, if you try to improve the recipe by adding moisture or reducing the fat content to make it healthier, you will fail. The rules of survival do not bend to modern dietary trends. There is also a structural advantage to pemmican that goes unnoticed until it is too late. Silence. Cooking raw beans requires boiling water for hours. Cooking rice requires steam. Roasting meat creates smoke. In a hostile environment, smell and smoke are vectors of betrayal. They travel for miles, announcing to every desperate soul in the vicinity that you have resources. Pemmican requires no fire. It has a negligible odor once prepared. You can consume a full day's worth of calories while crouched in a basement or hiding in a tree line without generating a single sensory signal that would give away your position. In the dark forest, the one who cooks is the one who dies. The integration of this superfood into your loadout changes the geometry of your survival plan. A standard 3-day assault pack is typically filled with bulky, freeze-dried meals that contain mostly air and packaging. By replacing those meals with pemmican, you reduce the volume of your food stores by 80%. This space can now be used for medical supplies, ammunition, or water filtration, items that cannot be improvised. You become lighter, faster, and more capable. Mobility is life. The man who is weighed down by 50 pounds of canned peaches is a slow target. The man with 5 pounds of pemmican in his pocket is a ghost. Civilization is a thin veneer of order painted over a chaotic biological reality. We live under the delusion that electricity, running water, and stocked supermarket shelves are permanent features of the universe. They are not. They are temporary anomalies made possible by a fragile web of just-in-time logistics and cheap fossil fuels. We are always 9 meals away from anarchy. History has proven this repeatedly, from the siege of Leningrad to the collapse of Venezuela. When the food trucks stop, the social contract evaporates within 72 hours. Your neighbors, the people you wave to while mowing the lawn, are not your allies in a famine. They are biological competitors. The man who relies on the system to feed him is a slave to that system. The man who holds the pemmican holds the keys to his own emancipation. You must stop viewing food as a consumer product and start viewing it as stored energy potential. Every brick of pemmican you manufacture is a battery. Just as you store electricity in lithium cells for a blackout, you must store caloric energy for a supply chain collapse. But unlike a battery which degrades over time, or gasoline which stabilizes in a year, this biological battery holds its charge for half a century. It is an investment that pays dividends to your children and grandchildren. It is an heirloom of survival. The knowledge of how to make it is more valuable than the product itself. If you possess the skill to turn raw, rotting carcass into shelf-stable fuel, you can survive in any environment, in any era. The preparation of this ration is the final exam of the survivalist. It requires you to overcome the disgust of handling raw fat. It forces you to be precise, patient, and disciplined. It demands that you ignore the modern craving for flavor and texture in exchange for pure, unadulterated function. This is the filter. The weak will not do it. They will bookmark this video, nod their heads, and go back to scrolling. They will buy a few extra cans of tuna and tell themselves they are ready. But when the winter comes, and the power grid fails, and the cans freeze and burst in the pantry, they will realize too late that convenience is the mother of extinction. Do not wait for the news anchor to tell you it is time to panic. By the time the crisis is televised, the opportunity to prepare has already vanished. The cattle will be gone. The suet will be unavailable. The electricity required to run your dehydrator will be cut. You must act while the world is still asleep. Go to the butcher tomorrow. Demand the suet they throw away. Buy the cheapest, leanest cuts of meat. Turn your kitchen into a factory of independence. Make 10 pounds, then make 10 more. Seal them, hide them, and forget them. This is not about hoarding. It is about insurance against the inevitable entropy of complex systems. All empires fall. All economies crash. The only constant in human history is the need to consume energy to fight off death. Pemmican is the answer to that fundamental equation. It is the ancient wisdom of the plains, forged in the fires of necessity, handed down to you as a final warning. The storm is coming. The question is not when it will arrive, but whether you will be the one begging for food, or the one silently eating in the dark, watching the world burn from the safety of your preparation. The choice is yours. But remember, nature does not negotiate, and physics does not care if you starve.